All right, guys, what's going on? It's Jack, and welcome back to another video. And today we're going to be talking about a faction overhaul for XDefiant. Now, this is basically kind of like something that I hope the devs kind of listen to, but at the same time, I'm also curious to see what you guys think. Now, I'm going to start with Echelon today. We're not going to be covering them all. This is going to be a 5-part series as of right now, because it would just be way too long of a video. Trust me, I tried. So with that being said, there is something very specific. Even if the devs don't listen to anything that I say or don't take my suggestions to heart, there is a very humble request that I do make in terms of how obtaining these abilities works. Right now, if you look at to the right of the Echelon's abilities, you've got the low profile. That's a passive trait. It's always on like a perk. That's fine. And then in the middle, you've got your activated abilities. You got the Intel suit and the digital ghillie suit. Now you have to choose one of the two. However, the way you obtain these is through a countdown timer, right? So they're not really earned. So despite the fact of how well you do or how bad you do, you can just sit on your ass and you can still earn these abilities for every faction. And I don't fully agree with that. I personally think they should be earned just like the Ultra. Now, going all the way to the Ultra is basically earned simply like a support streak from Call of Duty, so to speak. Once you have accumulated a certain amount of points, regardless of how many deaths you get or whatnot, whether it's by getting kills, getting assists, or objectives, or whatever else that you're doing for your team that accumulates your points, once you have gathered a certain amount, you basically have the ability to activate your Ultra whenever you want. Now, I think that the activated abilities should no longer be on a countdown timer, and I think they should work similar to Ultras, but with less points required to obtain them. So I would say maybe 1/3 or 1/4. That's obviously a dev decision. They know the math and the data more than I ever could. But to me, it would just kind of, it just stuck in the middle of my head, like 1/3 or 1/4 of what it would take to get an Ultra. And basically that would mean that every average player would be able to activate this activated ability. I would say anywhere from the low end to 3 times a match and to the high end 5 times a match for your average player. Now, if you're obviously an above average player or an elite level player, you'll obviously have the ability to access these even more. Now, if nothing else changes, and if they were to just change that in terms of how you're able to obtain your activated ability by actually earning it, I think we would see a lot more balance. I think we would see a lot less spam. And on top of that, I think players would actually kind of use them more wisely, right? As opposed to, oh, it doesn't matter when I use this, I'll get it again in 45 seconds or a minute or however long it is, depending on the faction, right? So I think there are multiple really good reasons as to why we should do it this way. And that is my humble suggestion. Now, as far as this particular faction, the Echelon, is concerned, there's maybe a couple little changes here that I recommend. As a matter of fact, not too many. As a matter of fact, spoiler alert for all the factions, there's not too many changes that I would make, but a couple of little suggestions that I would make, I think would just tweak things for the better. And they would lower the cheese a little bit, because even in a casual pub shooter, when you have too much chaos, you eliminate skill. And I think we could all agree that at the heart of this game, like the very foundation of this game, comes in the gunplay. And then the factions come in as a secondary factor. Now, I know the factions do play a big deal because this is an arcade arena / hero shooter. It is kind of a hybrid shooter or whatnot. But at the end of the day, it's still a shooter. So therefore, the gunplay needs to come first before everything else, right? We don't want things to get too crazy with these abilities, so to speak. We already have so many of them. So I'm going to start with the right, with the passive trait, and work my way to the left. Now, obviously, the passive trait, which basically works like a perk in this game, it's always on for every single faction. And in this particular one, it's basically low profile, aka ghost. And basically, it says your character does not appear on your opponent's minimap regardless of actions performed. So I think that's fine. Everybody's moving around. Everybody's playing the OBJ, everybody's doing stuff. So I think this is, so far, I honestly don't have a problem with this, and I think it should be left as is. No problem. All right, now when we get into the Intel suit, this is where things are kind of going a little nuts. I would personally love it to be more like, and again, I'm trying to take my Call of Duty mentality out of this situation, because this is not Call of Duty, this is XDefiant. And no matter how similar or how different they are, you really just don't want to put too much of a DNA into another game, into this one, because this game's still trying to be its own thing. It is what it is. I know what some of you guys might be thinking, but you get my point. But anyway, So instead of being able to see through walls, like right now, first of all, this thing basically lasts for about 15 seconds when you activate it or whatnot. I think you get about four solid pings within a radius or whatnot in terms of where you can see people through walls. Granted, if you don't see people through walls, you can you can move, and within that radius, hopefully you'll ping people by the time you get to them. Uh, but again, the cooldown I think is about, I don't know, 40-45 seconds or something like that. So within a minute, you'd get it again. So I think that's something a little too powerful to where you can get every minute. So how about instead of being able to see through walls, how about we make it to where you get 4 pings on a minimap? So instead of a pocket wall hack, let's give it let's do a pocket UAV, for instance, right? Or something like that. Why not? I don't see a problem with that. I think, and it also requires a little bit more skill. And no, I'm not talking about VSAT style to where you can see them as enemies as arrows. No. I mean where you see them as dots. Simple as that. Now, obviously, this would not work against the Echelon because they have that low profile. But again, with that being said, who knows? Maybe that's something that the devs could choose to have an exception to. But at the same time, that would take the passive trait out of the equation. So I don't think they'd go that far. But my opinion, passive trait, I'm sorry, the intel suit should just be a UAV instead of, and then of course, if you wanted to make it even more powerful, you could make it to where if there are enemies taking damage by other teammates, they can show up, as a ping on the minimap or something like that. Now, this is just something that I just thought of at the top of my head, but these are just ideas that I'm throwing out there. They don't all have to be put into the same ability. I'm just saying, like, these are examples that you could possibly use because they are earned, and at the same time, you want to have an element of skill to be able to use them, as opposed to, hey, I can see a guy through a wall, free kill or something like that. So anyway, moving on to the activated ability over here. So over here we have the digital ghillie suit, and I'm going to say right off the bat that I actually don't have a problem with this. Like, if you're completely still and you're not moving with this ability, you are pretty much like Predator. Like, you can't be seen. But once you move, and if somebody especially is close enough, they're going to be able to see you. But they still have to kind of look really hard, and it can still be confusing. And if you're aiming your gun at them and you're shooting at them, you're not really going to get aim assist, or you're going to get a lot less aim assist until you hit them, and then they decloak, and then after that, your aim assist works just fine or whatnot. But and obviously, if you're using it yourself, once you fire your gun, the cloaking, basically wears off, which is fine. It's a good balance. So I honestly don't really have a problem with the digital ghillie suit. So, all right. And of course, the Ultra being the Sonar goggles. And again, the Ultra needs to be good. So therefore, this one is actually really good because you're doing two things at once. You've got your wall hacking ability that goes across the entire map, and that lasts for maybe, I don't know, like 10 seconds or something like that. But at the same time, you also have a pistol that'll kill into 1 or 2 shots, depending on your distance or whatnot. So yeah, I would say this is good. This is good. It's really fun to use. And at the same time, it's earnable. Most people will be able to get it 1 time per match. And if you're able to get it twice or more, then that's great. But for the most part, it's a really, really good, Ultra. And I don't have any problems with it, believe it or not. Now, like I said, my biggest problem with this entire faction is the intel suit, because it's too powerful for something that you don't earn. But at the same time, if they were to just go and take the philosophy of making the activated ability earnable by, like, having a certain amount of score like the Ultra, but not as much score, I think it is something that people will be taking advantage of a little bit more sparingly, so to speak, especially when it comes to playing the objective to get that win. So in a team deathmatch scenario, obviously that's a lot different. But when you're talking about games like any other game mode that requires taking an objective in a pub, I think that would fit very well in order, when you're limiting the amount of times a person can actually use that, because they actually have to earn it. And obviously, the more points you accumulate to earning it, if you're able to earn more points because you're that good, then obviously you'd be using it more often. So, but anyway, that's pretty much all I got. I wanted to start with the Echelon because the Echelon is one of the most discussed topics within the community. A lot of people just really, there's a lot of complaints from a lot of players about the Echelon and all that kind of stuff. And again, if you were to just go back to basics and make the activated ability earnable, I think people would be complaining a hell of a lot less. You could change absolutely nothing about what I just mentioned here, or take nothing else into account. But if you were to just do that to make it earnable, then that would make things a lot better, in my opinion, and it would keep the foundation of the game strong, which is gunplay. And again, when you introduce too much chaos, you eliminate skill, and we don't want to do that, right? So anyway, that pretty much concludes this video, as well as my suggestions. And yeah, that's the start for the Echelon. And I want to know down in the comments section, I want to know what you guys think. Do you have any ideas in terms of what you would do with these abilities or whatnot? Or do you have any better ideas, or is there something else that comes to your mind? And of course, what do you think of the Echelon? Do you use this all the time? And of course, do you use it because of how powerful that intel suit is? And do you try to use it like a counter? Which goes back to my point. If you're not able to use it as much, and if it's not, you know, so much spammable, I think a lot of players would use a lot more varied factions instead of just sticking to one, because it's just that much powerful or that cheesy or whatnot. So if you make it earnable, or if you eliminate the cheese, or do both, and alter what that ability does as opposed to, you know, as opposed to what it's doing now, I think you can see really great change. And I think you'd see a lot of players using a lot more factions, which again would add more fun into the game. If players are going to be using a multitude amount of weapons, then they might as well use a multitude amount of factions, especially since we've got more factions coming. So with that being said, guys, that's going to end it for this one. Let me know everything that you want to say down below. And as always, I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time to watch and or listen. I'll catch you guys on the next one.